Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening. WeatherBrains episode number 615. It's the pre-show. An amazing time of this program. We let it all hang out. We share humorous anecdotes, boring personal stories, and we say very outrageous things. Bill, what outrageous thing do you have to say tonight?
Well, this was our annual Pizzitz Middle School balloon launch, and it came down in a field near Villarica, Georgia. And a hunter in a tree stand kept the students and teachers at bay for over 3 hours until darkness fell, telling them that they couldn't retrieve the device. So I nominate him Jerk of the Day.
Wow. Wow. We'll ring the bell for that. So did you tell him you're kind of a big deal?
No, I wasn't there, unfortunately.
Take him to the gun show? I mean, how do they get in?
Unfortunately, no. I was here monitoring from afar. But anyway, it was a perfect trajectory. Followed the model perfectly. Did exactly what it was supposed to do. Landed in a beautiful spot. Just couldn't get to it.
Well, let's just call this guy out. I mean, what's his problem? I mean, what was his reasoning for not?
He wouldn't say. He was very rude, and I don't know. It was a standoff for 3 hours. I thought they should have called the police, but I mean, he had every right if he was the landowner to be there. But he claimed that he had been given permission to hunt there. So
wow,
I hope he's a WeatherBrains fan and he's watching tonight.
Something tells me that he's probably not watching this show right now.
Yeah, I think he's into his second bottle of wild turkey, probably.
Woo! Wow. All right. That's Bill Murray at BillMurray.com for you lawyers. I say nothing but kind words about everything and everybody.
Hey, we need more of that, James.
Yeah, Brian is gone.
Yeah, he's on a cruise in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, huh?
Allegedly, and we have
questions over here.
Aubrey is out.
I guess I better invite our guest, huh?
Rick is out. So we'll make this puppy
May just be us, huh?
We'll make this sucker fly.
It's going to be all about Twitter, so you need to come loaded for bear, James.
Oh, well, I could play this.
Let's get social.
Social.
With social media, where we can spread the word and grow our reach and find our fans in their newsfeed. Let's get social with social media.
What's that last? I need like Spotify to tell me the lyric. What does it say?
Yeah, I don't know.
So something.
I tried to phase it out. It's bad, man.
Before you get to that point.
Like I'd not heard it that far along in a long time.
I know you played a lot of it there. That's what you get in the pre-show.
Usually about 5 seconds is all you get on the show here. So there you go.
First one that State Farm.
Hello, what's up?
That I just I had to turn it off. It's the one about. I just fast forward through it every time I hear it. It's got some old song from a Broadway musical or something in it, and it just makes me want to throw up.
Great. I feel bad. Tarmo sent us some audio, and it didn't make the air a couple of weeks ago. I feel really bad about this.
Hello, WeatherBrains. This is Tarmo Danielsov from Lagu, Estonia, with an update, and the news is weather. As I'm recording this, remnants of Hurricane Ophelia are hitting the UK and Ireland. I've been
so this was like a couple of weeks ago, and this is great. I mean, I feel so bad because it was a show where things were running long, and I had to go, do the news, and we just missed it. So we need to
make it up. Make it up to him.
Well, no, what we need to do, let's just play it right now. Look, I'm gonna play it on the pre-show here. It's 6 minutes long, but I just like hearing him talk. So this is a report that was in real time 2 weeks ago.
Hello, WeatherBrains. This is Tarmo Danielsov from Lagu, Estonia, with an update, and the news is weather. As I'm recording this, remnants of Hurricane Ophelia are hitting the UK and Ireland. I've been glued to the Irish television and radio coverage all day today. And I must say, given that this is Europe, the coverage is pretty good. And as if that wasn't enough, Invest 92L is starting to attract my attention since it might just want to come knocking on European doors again later this week as an extratropical system. With regard to Ophelia, I do have a few rants. Even in the last days, I've witnessed multiple goofs, errors, bloopers, or whatever you call it. Even though Ophelia has been extratropical since this morning my time, I've seen media call it a tropical storm, sometimes even a hurricane. Now, I get it, the impacts are significant, and all these terminology fights, tropical, extratropical, whatnot, with these kinds of impacts, well, this reminds me of the situation with Hurricane Sandy. You know, in some European languages, there are actually two.
By the way, Kevin, we're playing Tarmo's audio here. We missed it 2 weeks ago. I feel bad.
I popped in, really I logged in, and all of a sudden I was listening to WeatherBrains.
You thought you were getting the Estonian version.
Yes, yes.
So anyway, I wanted to play at least some of that, but this was supposed to run 2 weeks ago, and I just didn't get in the show. I feel bad. So
you should.
I know I should.
I said the same thing.
So I just invited our guest.
I have the perfect pre-show story. What do you always say? It's boring.
Good. A boring personal story. This is great. Dang, that camera looks good. Wow.
Yeah. What do you have a separate camera, or are you?
Yeah, no, my this is a Logitech camera. The one, my MacBook is old like yours. It's like 6 or 7 years old. So this is the Logitech.
Yeah, we have one of those Logitechs. I'll tell you the big difference I also noticed about that first one had only 4 gigs of RAM, and this one has 8, and you can really tell the difference there.
Mm-hmm. Well, so go ahead with your boring personal story. We're waiting.
What do you always say? Boring personal stories.
Yes. Humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things.
And say outrageous things, yeah. So here's the story. Last week, Kim had her pick of the week, right? And it was a story in the New York Times Magazine about a social scientist. And I read it. It was interesting. It was long and it was interesting. And I read it, I don't know, Tuesday or Wednesday, because I'm increasingly interested in this stuff, you know, the stuff that Laura's doing and Kim and Gina and all that stuff. So I read it, and that was it. And I've also asked Kim for, and she provided, some of the stuff that she's working on. So one of the things she sent me was her dissertation from a couple of years ago. And I started reading that just a tiny bit, but I wanted to try and get deeper into it here she comes. Kim, I'm telling the story. Don't ruin it. I'm telling the New York story because it's pre-show material. Okay. So she sends me the dissertation, and I wanted to read it this weekend. And so I was looking for a place to, get into this and be quiet. And we have a very nice downtown library. I don't go there often, but it's very nice. It's very large too. And so Saturday morning, everybody was out, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go and dig into Kim's dissertation. And so I go into the library, and I'm wandering around. Again, it's fairly large, but I find a nice table out of the way, and I sit down, and the first thing that I see when I look up is the print version of the New York Magazine with this kind of odd photo from Kim's story. Isn't that weird?
That's
And so I send the note to Kim. I said, oh my gosh, look what happened. And so she further freaks me out and says, things are all connected, aren't they? And now I'm like, I don't know what kind of weird social scientist witchcraft voodoo you guys are doing over there, but leave me out of it. This is all I'm saying.
She's a witch. She's a witch.
I don't know. It was weird, but it was even further because I don't know if you guys read the story, but Kim, back me up. The picture was like a little weird.
It's a little weird, yeah.
It's a weird picture.
eye-catching.
It's an eye-catching, weird picture, but to sit down and see this thing looking at me was just weird. So, how is that, James? Does that rank as a pre-show story?
The marvelous personal story, and it wasn't actually boring. I found it interesting. I mean,
Kevin can make anything interesting, though.
No, I don't know about that.
Right now, so was the boring part of this story reading my dissertation? Is that
Yes.
No, I'm not finished with it yet, but I really mean this. I told you this already, Kim, some weeks ago, but I'm fascinated by the stuff you guys are doing just because of what it is. But I really, how do I describe this? I don't know if I've said this in this way on this program yet, but one of the things I see us doing in the television part of the enterprise is that we are going through this process of justifying ourselves and our place in the world. And one of the ways that we're doing it, because there, quite frankly, aren't a lot of reasons, is really focusing hard on the severe weather and the inclement weather. And that is important. I know that. I get it. I get it. But as I've said many times, the example is, you go to Dallas-Fort Worth, and the average number of thunderstorm days per year is only between 25 and 35. That's not even severe weather days. That's thunderstorm days, right? And so that leaves a lot of days left in the year where you're trying to build a business model and run a business here. But what is fascinating to me about what you guys are doing now, and this happened, Kim, with the heading for me stuff, is that you start to see ways to justify your existence every other day of the year if you're looking through those same filters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah.
Bringing
So
it to a
heading,
very local level.
yeah. So heading for me on a tornado is somewhat obvious, but heading for me generically every other day of the year, if you look at that through the right lens, it makes a hell of a lot of sense.
It's awesome to hear you say that. I think that that's really what it comes down to, is people being able to relate in that way. And, when you're able to do that and put things into that frame,
Right.
it really does help.
Right.
How do you feel the broadcast meteorology segment of broadcast has been faring in that? I know what you're talking about, the sort of the upheaval, right, with broadcast media and finding your place. Has broadcast meteorology been largely buffered from that?
No, we're failing in that. The last thing that I heard, and this has been a couple months ago, maybe James knows, but I'm pretty sure this was a MAGID thing, James. Are you guys still MAGID or no?
No, we're not.
The last I had heard from them that, for 1,000 years, as long as James has been doing this, you go, if you do the research, right? And the research says, okay, well, what do you watch the local news for? And weather's always number one or number two. In rare cases, it's number three. And that was the way it was. And I have heard tell now that, however they're doing their research, that the MAGID people and whoever it is come out and say that has dropped by somewhere on the order of 40% or more. Is this what you're hearing, James?
Yeah, that's true. People get weather on their phones. I mean,
so
it is what it is.
We're not faring well in that. And so part of my goal is to, I think we still have value, but it's changing. And this is, I'm not going to climb on the social media soapbox, but the distribution platform of social media is not helping us in that. It's not helping. It is good. It's good for publicity. It's good for promotion. It's good for notifications. It is good for two-way communication and getting pictures of things. But it's difficult from our old declining business model. Somebody told me, and this has been 2-3 years ago, but they figured in wherever it was and whatever market it was, and James probably knows more about this even than I do, but would you agree with this, James, that we're losing probably at least 5% of the audience per year?
I think it's more than that on the late news. The early evening news is holding. I think now in most places, and the morning is holding, but the late one, it's dying.
Right.
But the people that are watching the morning and evening newscast are older and older and older,
Right.
which is a problem.
Right. Yeah, because
So-
they eventually all die.
Right.
And every day, some number of people decide, well, you know what, that was my last. Well, they probably don't decide that was their last newscast, but they watch less and less and less, and maybe they catch it once in a while, every now and then. But it's clearly not appointment TV anymore.
And let me say welcome to our television viewers. No, we joined here 2 minutes ago, and I didn't want to interrupt Kevin. He's on a roll here. This is good stuff. So we were in the pre-show here on WeatherBrains for October 30th, 2017. We should probably pick this up in the actual show for people that listen. But
that would give the actual show substance, and we know there's only substance on the pre-show.
That's right. So I just think we need to play this one time here.
Now, WeatherBrains is tracking the tracker. We track what the consultants track, so you can track along with us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, we're talking about consultants. All right, let's.
I think that fad is largely over, don't you, James?
I think we killed it. I think we have mocked consultants. We have mocked everybody that's done that to where they don't do it much.
But
so, Kim, have you done your homework for this thing tomorrow?
What's the thing tomorrow?
Well, we're involved in this thing called the Alliance for Integrative Approaches to Extreme Environmental Events, and learning how to say that is half the battle.
Yeah. Have you done your homework? I've started my homework, but I admit, after this show, I'm going to be finishing my homework.
Yeah, no, I've completed it, but I want to go back and review because I'm not so sure. I might pull a star or two or change them. So, and that's a tease for another topic.
And this is exactly what I was talking about, though, because you guys are talking about severe weather events, right? Again, critically important. I get it. I studied under James. I'm not negating that at all. But that's from a running of a business model standpoint that is dependent on, at some level, the old model and trying to transition into a new model. That's not enough. The Weather Service can do that all day long because they don't have the same accountability that we do from a business model standpoint.
Right. So that's our biggest problem. People will watch us. They will tune in. Our audience numbers are huge on severe weather days. But how many severe weather days do you have a year? Not that many. Most days it's sunny and pleasant. And how do you become relevant and attract an audience on a day like that? So that's the big challenge we all face. And it's always been that way to some degree, but now with people getting weather on their phones, why come to a television weathercast? So that's the deal.
Kim was going to ask something before you so rudely interrupted her starting the program.
Yeah, geez, how dare we start? No, I was going to just follow up and say, I mean, basically what you're talking about is right on, that most people do still in severe weather events get their information from you guys. So the question becomes, how do you sustain the business model? Because if you guys go, there are going to be a lot of people who feel it, and it's going to be a huge hit to our public safety chain, the chain of information that gets out to people that helps to keep them safe. And I know our guest is going to talk some about social media that's coming in to supplant and complement what you do in some ways. But I think that still broadcast television in study after study has proven resilient to those forces. And there are more people who are using social media during severe weather events, but primary source and source used by almost all is still local TV. So, I mean, for that, you just can't really be beat. I really hope that, the trends that are happening in bigger media don't also befall you all. So that was the only comment I was going to make before the show started.
Yeah. The social media thing is, boy, I have started even looking. I started looking through even the social media through a different, more, if you can believe it, more critical lens, and the stuff is just chilling. It is chilling.
It is.
Yes.
Gotta get rid of Facebook.
Yes, I'm
really
vile
and weapons grade ignorance.
Yeah,
it's frightening. I only look at it about once or twice a week because I have to for something. Yeah. And there is always something on that right side that scares me senseless.
Well, and what's fascinating, and I think is very welcome to me, is this intense focus now and this heat being put on them in light of this Russian thing and the fake news thing and all that kind of stuff. But that is only a symptom of the greater disease.
Yeah.
And the greater disease is the black box in which Facebook in particular is building the profile of you, right? And you can go in, you can start to drill down in settings, and you can find things and all that. You know, they give you this kind of 50,000 foot view, right, of the profile that you're building of you. But the stuff that's going on to build those profiles, and that has been weaponized by the Russians or whoever. And what's happening, what's going to happen now next is here's the best way to, there was a fascinating program. There's a PBS show called Frontline, right?
Absolutely. My favorite show on television.
Yes. And I actually remember this from years ago, and I went back the other day and I found these 2 episodes that speak to this, and it is chilling. They're about the credit card business. And the first one sort of laid the foundation for how there was a bank called Providian went out and sucked up everybody in this, what was kind of referred to as the subprime credit card market. And it caused huge problems. But then there was a follow-up episode that dealt with some of that. And the guy that ran Providian at the time was stunning, especially it was right at the end of that second episode. And he said something that is just chilling. He was frustrated at government regulators, not because they were making rules, but because they couldn't decide on the rules. And his position was, please just make the rules so I can set about my business of getting around them. Isn't that stunning?
Yeah, but
and that's what's going to go on around social media and all this discontent that's being sown, because the Russians are not sitting there going, oh, well, I guess we got caught. No, they're already on Act 2, and anybody else is too.
Here's the thing that scares me. Now we're putting these things in our homes that listen 24 hours a day.
We're already
paying
good
money to buy these things that listen all the time.
You and I have those little AirPod things, and they're listening all the time.
Yep.
And there's chemtrails too.
Facebook.
Whoa.
Facebook was accurately described.
Joshua, I'm so sorry.
Oh, Facebook was accurately described in one article as a surveillance company.
Oh, wow.
And
it
it's
is.
true.
I'm telling you.
It's totally true.
So Joshua, unmute for a second and let's hear your audio real quick before we get started to be sure you're good here. There's a little button up there at the top. You can
should be able to hear me now.
Oh,
how's that?
You're good. All right.
Good.
Let's.
He thinks he's come to the wrong show now, hasn't he?
Yeah, but I'm surprised he didn't hang up on us.
In fact, I'm exhausted. I'm done.
No, he's all about this social media stuff. His dissertation is on Twitter.
So here we go. Here we go. Stand by in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 615, the weekly show that's all about weather. This is for October 30th, Halloween Eve, 2017. Thanks a lot for taking the time to join us. We have a fun program tonight. Let's see. We got Kevin Selly, who, boy, his stuff has been so good. It's in the pre-show. And for those that listen to this audio podcast, there is a pre-show that's on the YouTube version. If you want to go back and listen to Kevin's rants, and they were very good.
Yes, I don't usually promote that, but this time I will promote the pre-show because we've talked a great bit about social media, and we've also learned that Kim is in fact a witch. So if you want to hear those, you should go back.
Spit my coffee all over my MacBook.
You can watch Bill do a spit take.
So, Kim, any response to this? Of course, people that are listening to the audio show don't know the backstory, but you might be a witch on Halloween. I don't know, but.
I mean, the real question is if I weigh more than a duck. I mean, and until you know that, you can't really know. And the world will never know. We'll never know.
I don't know that reference. What's that reference?
Monty Python.
Oh.
She's a witch.
I missed out on that. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. Well, that's your homework assignment, sir.
Okay. I'll go to, well, see, now she's going to try and what happened was Kim freaked me out on her last pick of the week. And so now she's going to carry that into the next week.
Awesome.
Under her spell.
Kim is lovely.
So let's just say
her. Go back and listen to the pre-show and you'll figure it out.
So let me say up front, we got a few folks out tonight. Brian is somewhere in where Cuba or Colombia or Nicaragua or somewhere down there on some cruise.
He's bringing
stealing
back
Wi-Fi.
illegal cigars. Yeah.
Rick and Aubrey are out. Nate Johnson never comes back on the show because he's a big shot now running the NBC O&O weather operation.
Yeah, we didn't make that announcement. We have to do that. A hearty congratulations to Nate because he is now, as you said, the director of weather operations for the NBC O&Os, and that includes all of the, at some level, the Univision stations as well. So he is, in James's parlance, a big deal.
Big deal. So we wonder if he's ever going to come back on the show because we just need him on the show to grill him over this new position. I mean, what does he do? Does he just
Yeah, it was either his dad or his father-in-law was coming into town, and so he was going to try and come tonight, but he didn't think that he would make it. But I asked him if I had permission to make the big announcement, and if you haven't seen it, I made some announcement on the Digital Meteorologist blog, and he put it on Facebook. But really hearty congratulations, because I know a little bit of the background of the position that he is taking, because it's a new position, and I know actually a fair amount of it, and it was something that they were planning for a long time, and they looked for a long time, and they looked far and wide. And so for Nate to have been offered and then accepted this position is a big deal.
Well, for this,
obviously his.
Sorry.
For
this was for less than the know. What is this position? What does it entail?
It's called Director of Weather Operations for the NBC O&Os. And there will be several levels to it. It's dealing, they went out and bought 3 radar trucks. Do you know about those? Big high dollar.
Oh yeah, they had one in Los Angeles.
They've got 3 mobile DAOs is what it comes to now within the group, and so he's going to at some level manage those. He also manages vendor relations, Barron, and he worked at Barron for a while, and WSI, now the weather company. He's going to manage that. He also will have some sort of guidance role with all of the NBC talent, and you're talking some big names and some big markets, but he will have some sort of help or guidance or oversight of what those folks do on the air as well. So it's a pretty big deal.
So what is he going to do? Like fly around from station to station and say, "Hello, I'm Nate. I am a big deal, and you're going to do what I say."
Yeah, I think he has it printed on a T-shirt actually.
I'm going to stop drinking coffee tonight.
Another spit take from Bill.
No, we got to get him on his show and talk about this.
There's your showtime.
Another show. What's that?
Another spit take from Bill.
Got to use it.
Yep. All right, Bill, bring in our guest here.
Yeah, James. Tonight's guest WeatherBrain is a big deal also. He's meteorologist WBRZ in Baton Rouge. He's a newly minted, we get to almost make the announcement here, a newly minted Doctor of Philosophy and Geography and Anthropology from LSU, Josh Eachus. Welcome to WeatherBrains.
Hey, thanks for having me, everybody. I appreciate the chance to come on. As they say, long-time listener, first-time caller. So love what you guys do and love to contribute to the conversation tonight.
Well, we're excited. I know you have to get up at like 2 a.m., so we'll try to be cognizant of your time. I need some insight.
Like 45 minutes past bedtime.
Game, Josh, give me some insight on the game coming up this Saturday.
I think the smart move for me as a Tiger is to bet for Bama. That way I can be pleased by a win for the Tigers or make some money on it. But I think I'd put my money on Alabama.
That's called hedging your bets right there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure I made a lot of people in Baton Rouge happy with that comment. Yeah.
No, none of them watch from here, so you're probably good.
Yeah.
Just us here. So you call yourself a communications nerd, Josh. What does that mean, in addition to being a weather nerd?
I caught up with, I'm sure you may have heard of Castle Williams out of University of Georgia. He's a fellow student, and we were talking and have a conversation, and as far as we know, is student researchers in the country, there's a handful of us that describe ourselves as weather communication students, since there's not an official program anywhere to our knowledge. So there's 4 or 5 of us that really have kind of built our own path, that have just kind of enrolled in either a doctoral communications or geography or meteorology program, and kind of found a niche to study communication, weather, geography all rolled into one. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years. And it's just kind of some intersection of social media, television weather, the science of meteorology, risk perception, and mass comm, and they all kind of roll into one. And I think it kind of looks at the bigger picture of what's going on in our field right now, which is pretty transitional, as you guys were just talking about a few minutes ago. It's an interesting conversation, and it ties directly into some of the work I've been doing.
So you heard that conversation as you were sitting there through the pre-show. Josh, talk about some of the things you heard there and what your opinions were on some of those comments, like our audience kind of drying up, going away.
I think it's the statistics are pretty amazing to this point, and Kim touched on this, but we get so paranoid, I think, in television weather that every time someone clicks off or we lose a viewer, we think that's part of a bigger trend. But a lot of my literature review is looking for previous surveys onto where people have been going to get weather information, and sadly, these surveys are not done all that often. We had a data pool came from 06 and a data pool that came from 09, and there are papers that were published in 10 and 12. And to my knowledge, the one that I just finished is the latest survey that we've done on this outside of a NWS technical report or some UCAR research. And I contacted the UCAR team out there that did those studies, and to their knowledge, there were not any other similar studies. And what I found is that television remains number one as far as where people are turning for their weather information right now.
Something you'll love, Josh, just on that note, there is a group here at the University of Oklahoma that's been funded to start collecting longitudinal data. So they do quarterly surveys of the subscale of Oklahoma, and then annual surveys nationwide on their census balanced population panels. So they're really good.
Yeah.
We didn't have that, and we don't, without that, we don't know what the trends really mean. But that just came online this past year, is the first year of collecting that data. But you're right, very sparse before that point.
So let me understand that if I can, Josh, because for a second there I tried to equate it to ratings, and I was probably wrong. But I see the battle as, a lot of people are looking at the battle as trying to be number one in a market, but their percentage of the pie is getting smaller. But that's not what you're saying?
Well, you know what? I did not look at it from a ratings perspective, and I know working in TV. Yeah, I very well agree with you guys that there are dips and points over time. Some shows hold steady, but yeah. And looking at some of the previous studies in 2009, for instance, television was the number one, followed by newspaper. Believe it, that seems like decades ago, but that was the number two just about 8 years ago. And,
in terms of getting weather information, or just overall? In
terms of it was the of people that were polled, where do you turn to get weather information? That was the question. So the percentage, I believe, and I've got the exact numbers, was 46 for television, and or 36 for television and 24 for newspaper. And then in the paper published in 12, it went up for television. 43% were turning to television. And what my interest was kind of social media and mobile phone applications. And in 2012, mobile phone apps had less than 9% of the preference for weather information. Interestingly,
but you don't have anything since then?
Since the one I just did. I just collected survey data in my dissertation. And at the advice of, I'm sure you guys know Laura Myers and Susan Jasko, they told me to go ahead and partition it out by state to start. So I started with my home state of Louisiana. So within Louisiana here, the same trends are generally there. We've seen some shifts at the top to kind of level it off between television, internet websites, and Facebook. Unfortunately, we're all kind of tied for the number one spot. Twitter and cell phone apps were still a distant last place. The most interesting trend in that was that mobile phone applications had the most first choice votes, and of the 5 platforms I pulled, they also had the most last place votes. So people are saying, I love to get my weather information on mobile apps, or I hate mobile apps. But overall, it balanced out that TV and websites were still at the very top, which I did not expect. I expected phones to dominate.
And when you said Facebook, you qualified it and said, unfortunately. What did you mean by that?
I think it's a conversation that has been had over and over again here on WeatherBrains, and that's that, as we all know, people turn to Facebook for weather, and that means, I would say, for the average user, when weather shows up in their feed, they get that information. But I know as far as time-sensitive information, because of the Facebook algorithm, that may not work out to our advantage. So that's why I think it's unfortunate that there's not necessarily a full public knowledge out there yet, or public education, that's not the ideal platform to gather weather information.
Right. So when you say people go to Facebook for weather information, does that mean they're going to James's page and sitting there and hitting refresh, or are they just waiting and for things to scroll by? Parse that out a little bit.
Well, I'll be honest. In this study, we just asked for where you get your weather information and where you get your watches and warnings. So that's as far as I went, and I didn't ask what pages they were going to. It was a broad survey of digitally connected Louisianans and what channels they use for weather information. And that actually was not the focus of my study. It was just a part of the information that I collected. The focus of my study was the content of the messages that they're getting. But I did gather some, I'll say, peripheral data there on what people are turning to understand where Twitter was, because that's specifically my area of study. And I just found those rankings. I had them rank where they like to get their weather information. So
the
couldn't answer
process,
any more detail.
Yeah, the process by which they're doing it, or a little more fine, you don't have, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that is not something I looked at as to when, where, why. Yeah.
Yes, because for Twitter especially, I have used this as the canonical example since I don't know how long. James and Bill will go take a nap here, but I keep saying this rings in my ears every day. Is the NWA meeting after 2011, the outbreak there, and they had an open forum, and some woman got up to the microphone and she said, "When I heard there were tornadoes around, I started searching around on Twitter." And that just terrified me. And it does to this day, that she would, and I'll use the same bit, but that she would start, searching around amongst tweets from her nephew that said, "I'm eating cheese," looking for tornado information.
You know what? That just describes, though, I think, the need for us in weather to understand risk perception. I looked very carefully at something called the protective action decision model. And it basically assimilates how people search for information, and then how they assess that information, and then how they make decisions on how to react to weather information based on these psychological processes. And at the very beginning of that is social and environmental cues. So whether we like it or not, it's a human nature for the non-meteorologist to see what friends, relatives, and the environment around them is doing before they actually take action.
I have to go do the Fox show, which I'm really bummed about. But Josh, I'm just going to come over to your house after the show. So I'll be back.
Sounds good. If you're rooting for the Flyers, that'll be great.
So Josh, that's interesting, because in your dissertation, and I read it, and I didn't fall asleep like
I appreciate
Kevin did
that.
reading Kim's. Yours had slides.
Wow.
And I loved it. I'm just kidding, Kim. You know that. You said, you ran a survey, which was channel preferences for weather. And you said in weather information that the most first choices was the phone app and Facebook.
Yes.
But that websites had the highest mean. So
Correct.
Describe your methodology. And that's an interesting, and I thought Kevin was going to say this, but he's constantly preaching that we need to stay on our own platforms. Are those weather websites for TV stations or what?
So, all right, methodology and just this part of the survey is I wanted to understand where people ranked where they get weather information. So if you're digitally connected, if you have access to all 5 platforms, I would say that are traditionally offered by a broadcast television station, TV, website, Facebook, Twitter, mobile phone app, what's your preference in gathering weather information? And I gave you all 5 of those platforms and asked you to rank them from 1 to 5. So the mean you're talking about there, the mean score, is basically the averages of first place votes, second place, third place, fourth, down to 5th. And the highest mean score, was actually from websites, which I didn't expect. I actually thought that phone app was going to be at the top, but phone app did have the most first choice votes, also had the most last choice votes. Ultimately, this gave the phone app the lowest mean score.
But it was way down on the mean. I mean, it was 5th place on the mean.
Right, it was. And that's because most of them, people either, like I said, loved it, or they ranked it 4th or 5th. They got the most 4th and 5th place votes. Twitter was way down there as well, whereas television, Facebook, and website were all kind of clumped towards the top with a similar mean, with website nudging out Facebook, just nudging out television.
What's the general usage of Twitter, of the general population? Does anybody know? Do you know that, Josh?
I kind of got a sense through my study here that people generally don't care to use Twitter for weather information. I think they may go to it when there's severe weather, but they really, and I asked them, what are some reasons you use Twitter? And they said to find watches and warnings. But when then shown an example of a watch or a warning, they didn't necessarily, that didn't appeal very highly to them. Whereas in a case study I've done, 2 case studies, The main reason, and I think we could all agree to this, what we find is when we share pictures and video, that seems to be the most popular. Ironically, when I asked people what's the reason you use Twitter, they ranked finding pictures and video at the very bottom. But that's most commonly that I found the types of tweets that have the highest level of retweets and the highest number of impressions as far as the Twitter metrics go.
Can I throw out a question before I have to go? And I'm sorry, Bill, but and you guys roll it around if and when you want to. But the question is, are we and have we been training them to go to social media platforms for weather information?
But did you hear what he said, Kevin, about the websites being number one?
No.
Yeah, he said in his sources of where to go for weather information, websites had the highest mean response.
Okay, that's great to know.
Because I quoted you and I said I thought you were going to go there, earlier about we need to maintain our own platforms.
Yes, and I still there is some value in the social platforms, but one of the points I've been making here when James and I argue about this is that we're training them that it's a good place to go, and I would love to hear that, but I really got this show coming up. I hate this Fox show.
Kevin,
show title.
I get my show title tonight. The spit takes thing.
Probably each individual station kind of has their own preference on how they do that. I personally, I have openly on the air and type on websites and on Twitter saying, please avoid Facebook in times of breaking weather. Yes, we'll be there for you. We'll do some Facebook Lives, which are up to the minute information because it's live. But I've been very public about not using Facebook as a reliable source for timely weather information. I have occasionally pushed people to our mobile app, pushed them to Twitter, but I think it remains, especially based on these findings, join us on the air. We'll take you through this if this is a life or death situation on the air. So I think while we may be perceiving and what people are doing are two different things. I think because the push from news management to get on these other platforms, we kind of perceive them as maybe more important, or that we're pushing them on the public because they're being pushed on us. But I don't necessarily think that means that's where the public is going, because this kind of goes back to cord cutting and people taking TV away altogether. Ultimately, people are going to go to what's best for them to get information. And in this day and age, I think people still prefer that one-on-one communication. When there's a life or death weather situation, they want to hear it from another person. And even a tweet from another person, or a Facebook post from another person, or a website blog from another person does not coincide with that one-on-one interaction you get from hearing another person's voice, another person looking you in the eye and telling you that. And I think that the survey results that I found kind of justify that.
So Kevin's throwing things from the Fox grave over there, but is there evidence that we are training them? And I suppose he means to go to social media.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of just touching on there. Is I think I don't have any evidence in my studies to say that we are, because that's certainly not where they're trending to go. And I think, again, we may perceive that we're training them to go to social media because we're being told by our managers to put things on social media. One of my biggest takeaways and one of my go-home points in my dissertation is that Twitter is a platform for weather information. It is a choice for weather information, but it's not the choice. So yeah, it's it's a platform we need to be on because there is a segment of the population that uses it and counts on it. And it is a platform that we need to know how to use correctly, but it's not the only platform. And certainly right now, it's not the majority platform.
I think you quoted a number in your dissertation. I think it was in the 20s for Twitter penetration. Now, I count James Spann as a Twitter expert. So James, obviously, you're over 250,000 followers and use it actively. And one of the things that, maybe Josh can get into in a minute, and y'all can debate some of these things, from his findings and your practical experience, James. But, what gets the most engagement from your audience when you're tweeting?
Well, and let me just say this. I don't think Twitter is all that important in this market. We tend to think it is, but by far, and I think I can prove this by statistics, Instagram is much more important. And I think for a long time, Instagram was kind of a target younger demographic type platform where you're reaching 18 to 24-year-olds. But quite frankly, over the last year, I have seen a large number of older adults become inactive on Facebook and they move to Instagram solely because of the political rhetoric that they see on Facebook that's so constant and just so abrasive. They want to escape that and just go to a happy place. And Instagram is a happy little place with pictures and videos and stories. And again, I believe this to be true, that in my market, that Instagram is much more important. So I have tried to really work on making content available there via stories. Not the way I use Instagram. I post images, the best of the best of the best, the all-star pictures, the greatest people have sent me. It's this repertoire of unbelievably remarkable weather photographs, and I don't want that to change. I put the weather content in the stories that disappear after 24 hours. So that's my opinion. And again, everybody, a lot of people in the weather enterprise, we hang out on the tweeter. We just hang out. We're on the tweeter. But to Joe Q Public, I think the most important is, in this order, it's Instagram, or Facebook and Instagram. And then comes Twitter, and then comes Snapchat. To me, those are the big four. And I use Snapchat to reach younger people. And again, by stories. Sometimes it's kind of silly, but in order to reach them, you have to be somewhat silly, and you have to kind of draw the line on that. So, but in terms of what works with engagement, and this is how we're ranked. I mean, in almost every newsroom in this country, if you walk in the newsroom, what's the first big monitor you see in there? It's a monitor with the social media feeds of all the local stations and the talent, and I use that term loosely for some weather people like me, but you're ranked every minute you walk in there. And the metric that they typically use in most newsrooms, it's not how many followers, it's engagement. So, you have to learn how to be good at that if you want to get a contract extension, if you want to get a job, if you want to move up, which is kind of sad because that's so far from what we used to do on television, but you have to learn this stuff. And
so is that likes and retweets, James, on Twitter and whatever the corresponding things on other social platforms are?
Yes, in any interaction, whether it's a like, or Facebook has all these different options now for some type of reaction to what you post, but it's sharing, comments, all this kind of stuff. And I did pretty well yesterday. What do you think was the big engagement yesterday? And understand where I am, we have no weather issues yesterday.
Probably a sunset picture.
Well, it's close, Kim. It was snow from eastern Tennessee in the Great Smoky Mountains. I get a lot of pictures from there, and these were stunning pictures. And one post on Facebook of two pictures from Cades Cove, Tennessee, that one post it reached over 1.2 million people. And people,
and that's what you would call an impression, right? That's what that would be.
Yeah, it says reach, whatever that means. I don't know.
Is that what that means to you, Josh? Because this was involved in your dissertation.
Yeah, an impression means how many feeds did that tweet appear in, and obviously they also have one called engagements, and that takes it a step further than a retweet or a like. That means that the tweet was actually clicked on, a picture was clicked on, a link was clicked on, or the tweet was enlarged. So 1.2 million very likely was the impressions metric of that tweet.
And again, this is Facebook, not Twitter. This was on Facebook.
Yeah.
And again, in fact, I'll do it. Let's do a screen share for those that are listening. I'll kind of talk you through this here. So let's see. Let's click on this, and I think you guys can see this now. Let me kind of expand it out a little bit here. These are yesterday. I'm going to find the one that had the big numbers. And again, most of the posts yesterday were snow. Yeah, there we go. Cades Cove, Tennessee. And again, this was posted yesterday, 3/31. And again, somebody posted it or sent it to me by private message. And look at the number of people reached. Can you see that number right there?
Oh, my goodness.
That's 1.773 million. And again, they're beautiful shots, but I'm just telling you, the sexy stuff wins the engagement battle. And for weather, the sexy stuff, it is typically involving snow, ice, tornadoes, severe storms, hurricanes. Some of the images from Harvey in Texas, I had a big week. I did like 25 million plus in a week on Facebook. So and what Kevin was talking about, Josh, the question, the issue we all face here, what do you do on nice days? Because understand, most days you don't have snow or hurricanes or tornadoes. You're just dealing with nice weather. So how do you do it? And we got to learn to survive. So that was my trick of engaging on a calm weather day in my market, was just showing some snow pictures up the road in Tennessee.
No, and everything you said there is right on the money with what I found. I really wanted to do research, just kind of proving what I think we in broadcast already knew, and it is that pictures are the winner, and they get the big equity even in severe weather events. So that's what I did. Was I took a tornado event and a flash flood event. We've had 2 in the last year here in Louisiana. And I looked at all of the tweets that passed through my account, whether it was originated by me or retweeted by me, through the duration of those events. And clearly, I mean, the knock out of the park, the most retweets and most impressions were from photos. And I think that's, and again, I'm only talking about Twitter here because I studied Twitter specifically. That is what people are looking for. The interesting thing to me was when you ask people why they use Twitter, they don't even consider that they're on Twitter for pictures and video of weather phenomena. However, it's one of the features that they react overwhelmingly most favorable to, as you just proved right there. And as a secondary point, and this is not in my study, but I think from a broadcast field, how do we survive? You hit it on the head. On these quiet weather days, when there's high pressure overhead and it's blue and sunny outside, and nobody's really caring about what the actual temperature is or what the sky condition is, you got to find those interesting weather pictures from around the country to keep the engagement up in your market. I can tell you that if I share a picture of my dog sitting on the couch next to me, that's going to outperform by 10 times the daily forecast on a quiet weather day. But I need to do that because that's going to get more likes and eventually drive more likes to my page so that more people are there when I need to tell them about a potential severe weather outbreak. I hate that it works that way, but I mean, not everybody is a weather nerd like us.
And one thing too, for me, I'm very blessed. I get pictures from all over creation, and I think part of it's the WeatherBrains family here, and I'm thankful to everybody that sends me an image. Think of all the weather people in the world, and they chose to send it to me, and I'm very honored. So I have this marvelous inventory of images and video, and that's the one thing. Let me tell you what, I've learned the video trick too. Facebook, especially on the Facebook side, the video scores very high in Facebook engagement and views and all that. But I can pick and choose that on the, slow days. But the one thing I don't want to do, Josh, I don't want to get to the point where that's all it is. Like, hey, how's your Monday going? Tell me what you're going to be doing tonight. I mean, that's just I don't go down that path. Again, I try and use pictures and video that's related to weather. And you're right. And look, Josh, I'll be the first to raise my hand. I have posted pictures of the cats out here in the parking lot of the TV station. God bless those cats, because they've saved my engagement numbers in a lot of days. We have 3 cats and 6 raccoons out here. And I got a great video of the raccoon eating out of the trash can. And it's just, but, occasionally I'll do that. But it's a fine line. It's just a fine line we have to walk involving your credibility. I don't want to cross that line. But then again, you've got to do what you've got to do. It's a different world we live in, and we've got to survive. In order to keep our jobs, your engagement numbers have to stay high.
Yeah, and we have a core competency, and that's weather. So you're posting weather-related pictures, and I think that's, obviously that's fair game. And yeah, something with the cats every now and then, that's fine. I would think you think in your mind there's a percentage that you want to keep that under, maybe 10, 20%, something like that. But it is part of the step to build your audience so that you can then post valuable information to you that the public needs, and you at least have that audience engagement high. Because keep in mind, you could have all the followers in the world, but if they haven't liked one of your posts lately, a post you want them to see isn't going to appear high in their timeline. So you have to keep them engaged regularly, not just build that audience over time. You need to constantly have those followers there. And I think that's going to be a personal preference for everybody out there, especially those that are trying to build their following still. Unlike you, where the following is quite large compared to others in the country. And I think that's all probably a personal choice that people are going to make. And I think that will get weeded out over time. If you're posting one too many selfies over time, I think someone's going to go elsewhere for weather information. So you have to strike that right balance. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if we'll find the answer to that. But you seem to have done it. And I think there are people that can do it without kind of sacrificing their credibility from a weather standpoint.
So Josh,
I'm gonna dig in here, Bill, while you're talking and try. I have not looked at Twitter analytics in a while. So while you're talking, I'm gonna dig through and see what scores well on Twitter for me.
Yeah, and Kim's got some stats I want to hear too here in just a second. But Josh, you spent some time looking at these two events, the big flood event and a big tornado outbreak in southeast Louisiana in late winter, and you worried about for your study what got the most attention, what got the most exposure.
Right.
And so what did typically get the most attention on Twitter for meteorologists in your markets?
So it was, there's two parts of that. I wanted to find intention exposure just in general, and then I wanted to study specifically warnings because they're the most important, obviously, because they have a life and death nature to them, and found out in that regard what got the most attention and exposure. So part one was overall, as I just kind of touched on a moment ago, anything with picture or video just blew away other tweets. And I categorized tweets into three parts. I said it's either an official statement, so something coming from a government entity such as the National Weather Service, or perhaps local emergency management office of a closure of a road or something like that. Second category was engagements and observations, aka pictures and video, reports from the field. And the third category I went with was called value added, and that's something that, I just saw James turn and look. That's something we're aware of in TV, is because we're always being told by the consultants to add value, give them something that the Weather Service can't, or that you might not have been able to share on the air, such as the velocity signature or something like that. And I, just going on what the consultants were saying, hypothesized that those value adds would get the most engagements or get the most exposure and attention. Did not. They got the least. Pictures and video by far blew value adds away. They actually got the least exposure and attention. And I think that's because a lot of them contain jargon, and a lot of them are not the critical message in a time of a disaster, such as a tornado outbreak or a flood event. Now, part two was I wanted to find out what types of warning messages got the most exposure and attention. And I compared two different formats of a warning, one that included the threat of the situation at hand, what action one can do to protect themselves, and some sort of geographic reference, whether it be a map or an outlined area of parishes or counties that were in a warning. The second type I looked at only provided the threat. It was one of those automated Lixbot type of warnings where it just says tornado warning for X, X, and X county. And by far, the most attention and exposure went to that warning format that included a threat, an efficacy, and a geographic reference point. So the more detail you can provide of that warning, the better. And what I go back to on that was why that was surprising to me is consultants have told me people don't like being told what to do. Don't tell people to wear sunscreen. Don't tell them to take shelter in a storm. People don't like being told what to do. Yeah, I've been told by TV.
Kevin, have you heard that same thing from a consultant?
Yeah.
Wow.
Part of it,
realize that we have to do it.
Well, part of it is this idiocy. Like you watch TV and hey, it's cold outside. Be sure and grab a jacket. Well, do you think so? Right. What's the matter with you? People know. And look, I wear cargo shorts when it's 32. Don't tell me how to dress. I know this, and they get. There's no need to get into that. So I do believe that to be true.
It's really interesting. Jeanette Sutton did a study, and this was in 2015, and I know the rules of Twitter have changed since then. This study didn't include as much about visuals, but she did find that when you include this call to action statement, it does reduce the tendency of a tweet to be retweeted. So she was looking at tweets for weather warnings and what got the tweet greater social buy-in through that.
So say that again, Kim. You're saying that having efficacy in the tweet reduces the percentage?
having the direction, having the evacuation or shelter command reduced the tendency for it to get retweeted, whereas things like having an evaluative component, emotion, and hazard impact positively affected its tendency.
So Josh, what was some of the efficacy?
In line with what Josh is saying. Sorry.
Kim, actually, the way I interpret what you said there is actually different than what I found, because I found that I got more retweets on tweets that had a warning statement and an action statement combined. And what I found that was probably attributable to that that old adage that of milling and people seeking more information. So I think in the cases of where a tweet is retweeted when it only combines the threat without the efficacy, that's because in a way people are unaware of what they need to do, and they're just kind of sharing this information, trying to grab onto feedback from elsewhere to figure out what they should do from there. I think providing that action statement gives people an opportunity to know what to do from there and then advance that through their social network. So I think there's two different findings.
Well, I think that it's really important, but it's probably contextual. So there's her study. She has a variety of studies on this topic. I'm actually trying to find the most recent for just weather. That actually was a study, I apologize, that was across different risk domains. So she's been digging. So it's interesting then, and she does note in some other articles that sometimes it really depends on the person's perception of risk in a given event. It depends on, in a crisis situation, how much time you have. That can all affect retweeting. So sorry for the confusion on that, but I'm trying to find her most recent weather stuff because it's really interesting to look at it. You guys are looking at it in sort of different ways. You're looking at the impressions, right? And she's looking at the retransmissions. So very interesting.
Yeah, so what I did, I looked at it in two ways. I counted the impressions to see how many timelines it appeared in, and I gauged that as exposure. But then I calculated that a retweet or a like gauges some finite level of attention, because if you retweeted it or liked it, you must have read it. Whereas if it makes an impression in your timeline, we can't guarantee that you read it. You may have just simply scrolled by it. So I counted a retweet or a like as basically the coup de grace here is what we're trying to achieve, because that gives it the optimal chance of traveling further through that social network if it's retweeted or liked. Chances are they're going to tell somebody else about it, or in doing a retweet, they are telling others about it. So that's what I was looking for here. Again, I found that warnings that contained the threat, what you should do to protect yourself, and a map of the warning and the warned areas seem to be the most effective style of warning.
So James, comment on that for what Josh just said for an effective warning on Twitter. Those three elements. Do you try to do that in your Twitter feed?
I don't think about it. I mean, I am so frazzled when we have active weather days, and I don't automate things on Twitter. A lot of meteorologists automate their post, and in my personal opinion, that's not effective. I think they would like to know that it's coming off my fingertips. There might be a typo there. It might not be perfect, but I think that helps. But I honestly don't think about things like that. And I just try and throw out what I believe is important in a very short form. I don't do call to action statements unless there's some kind of a tornado emergency. I mean, get into a safe place now if you live in these places, but I don't think about it. But while I got the mic, let me quickly show you. I've not looked at this before. I say before, I've looked at it, but it's not looked at it in a long time. You guys want to see my top tweets of the month?
Yes, we do.
Let's analyze these real quick here. So, and this is, I guess by date, Nate is now a hurricane. That's all that one says. Hater of the night did 80,000 impressions. Engagement rate 28.4. Haters are running wild. The hate tweets are the big ones. Those are the two that gathered more than anything else. Haters are running wild and hater of the night, which, the way I do it during severe weather and I cut into TV programming, I'll take one choice hater and retweet it. Forecast for TD16, soon to be Tropical Storm Nate. Understand this forecast can and probably will change. I thought uncertainty was a big part of communicating in that tweet, so uncertainty was the headline there. The Cades Cove, Tennessee pictures, the snow pictures did well. UAB on the big win. That has nothing to do with weather. Water spout video on the Alabama Gulf Coast. Oh, brother, whenever you see me say, oh, brother, that means somebody spelled lightning as lightning from some type of official, university account, which that was. Nice to know all the other stations follow me so closely on Twitter. That's when the other stations steal my material. That got a big one. Snow at Gatlinburg. Conditions deteriorating on the Gulf Coast. That was a video during the approach of Nate. No win situation in football. That was another hater thing. Fiber is rocking tonight. That's just bandwidth.
You got 41,000 engagements from that.
Yeah, that was AT&T Fiber. I just put a speed test on there.
So what the first column is what, James? That's impressions and then retweets and likes or what?
impressions, engagements, and engagement rate.
Gotcha.
Is what this is. And again, I study Facebook more than this. Wrigley Field, a baseball tweet. A tornado north of Orange Beach earlier this afternoon. That was video. Water spout video. So, and again, that's,
Well,
and I
this
tweet
is-
a lot. And those are the ones that have done very well. And we've had some pretty active weather.
You've had other social media consultants tell you that you do it all wrong, James. Looks to
Yeah,
me like you're kind of doing it right.
Well, I don't know. I probably am doing it wrong. I don't know anything about this. I know nothing. I'm just trying to survive, and I'm trying to do what's right. So that's why I like having Josh and Kim on here, so I can learn. So I need to shut up and listen.
Well,
I'm shutting
like
up and
Kevin's
listening.
statement because he can't talk right now, so I get to talk for him. But he said, that when we're talking about the consultants and these, crazy recommendations, he says this is why Josh, Kim, and Laura are the next wave. They're coming from meteorology, while the traditional consultant comes from a TV and trickery perspective. I thought that was a very interesting statement, Kevin. I know you can't comment on it, but that's true. That's what's happening. So.
I do want to follow up really quickly. Sorry, Josh. I'm curious to know too. Had you ever talked with Jeanette? I find it really interesting. You guys have done such parallel research.
You know what? I have not directly connected with Jeanette. I've met you at conferences before, and I've met with Dr. Myers and Dr. Jasko, but I haven't met with the UCAR gang either. I think it's Jeff and Julie, and I'd like to meet them too, and hopefully do some overlapping study. She's a citation of my work for sure. I've used some of that, and it's all fascinating to me. And I think what I love to read in all these conclusions, and you'd probably agree with me, Kim, and in speaking with Castle Williams, I use his name again, for weather communication, and this is why whatever we find in these studies are great and we can use it, but take it with a grain of salt. I don't think there's a one size fit all. Every situation is going to be different. Every person is going to respond differently. The best we can do is use the research that we have to deliver the best message possible and make that resonate with the most people possible. Even if my findings are followed to a T, I'm certain there's a segment of the population I'm going to leave out in my next warning communication. However, I'm confident that I've at least optimized my ability to reach and resonate with the most people.
And you led right to where I was wanting to go there with audience segmentation. What you were focusing on, your case studies in particular, were a sample from Louisiana, right?
Correct.
And your survey, was that national?
Survey was at the advice of Dr. Jasko and Dr. Myers, segmented to Louisiana. That way we can expand that out state by state and compare states, instead of trying to group the entire population into one.
Right.
Because in this case, Kansas may respond very differently to a tornado event than we here in Louisiana do.
Yes, exactly. So something that's so important about that, we have different disaster subcultures everywhere, different populations that are adapted differently to different things. So I thought it was really interesting. So thinking about that, just those findings you just shared, Jeanette's sample is more nationwide, but looking at hurricane cases, exactly what you found for the attributes of the message that get retweeted more. So there is something important to what you just said.
Okay.
That is more generalizable to a national sample, but I love that you did verify that with a very close look at Louisiana.
Sure, yeah, and I would like to do this further in other states. And I think another interesting point, one of my dissertation committee members and a co-author of a paper we're trying to publish, Dr. Michelle Meyer here at LSU, she came up with an interesting way of coding for the next study, and that's to take these same events, or maybe take a different event and some different accounts, and assign a point for every time there's a threat appeal in a message, an efficacy appeal, and maybe some sort of personalization or geography, and see if those messages containing all those components score most highly, or see how many of those messages are actually available. Because it seems like the more we can cram into that 140 character message, which I know seems counterintuitive, the more effective it's destined to be, because you get more, sizzle on the steak.
If you guys wouldn't mind me asking one quick follow-up question, I'm really interested, putting the geographer hat on, how do you think the folks in Louisiana maybe are different, unique with respect to how they're adapted to the weather versus the rest of the country? How might the communication be different?
Do you know what? I'm going to say in a word, and I lost the earbud there, in a word I'm going to say cynical, and I actually learned this in dealing with the local National Weather Service. And that's that here in Louisiana, especially because we're so hurricane prone, and especially with Katrina so very recent still, we especially from talking to people, deal with weather as a we'll see what happens type of basis. I find that there's very low trust in us here. One of the most frequent comments is on our Facebook post, Twitter post is, yeah, right, we'll see it. I'll see it when I believe it. I think people are very cynical here because they've been burned a couple of times, and especially with hurricanes and how quickly they can shift. And we're just now coming into an era where we can explain uncertainty a little bit better, that people are starting to accept that. But Louisiana has really been left out high and dry too many times for people to fully put trust in the weather enterprise yet. And I've previously worked in Pittsburgh and Ohio and found that trust in Louisiana is much, much lower. People here are a little bit nicer to us, but I think they overall have a mentality is, I'm going to go out and carry on with my plans, and we'll see if the forecast comes out to be the way they said it was.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah, everyone in Louisiana, especially in Cajun country, thinks they're a meteorologist, I think, from my experience. I've talked to some interesting folks down there around Houma and Thibodaux and places like that.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. They say that in every market.
So, Josh, a few things that just, I'll say a statement out of context and you put it in context and sort of expand on it for us. But, you asked the question, what is the value added conundrum? Or I'm going to ask you, what is the value added conundrum?
I think it's what James and I were talking about a little bit earlier. I think it's that do we, in these high impact weather events, jump onto our social media and provide a technical expertise when that is not the key information at hand, as such as the warning, what you should do to be safe. And by technical expertise, I say, oh, look at the structure of this storm cell, or look at this velocity signature. In my opinion, a high impact weather event is not the time to educate about the weather. I think you need to get to the key points of keeping people safe on these high impact weather events. And oftentimes, I think in these high impact weather events, there's more attention on them. And you'll not only have the local area commenting on the situation and trying to keep people safe and provide information, but you'll have commenters from outside of the area. And that's the nature of social media. That's the nature of hashtag WX Twitter, is that even if I'm in New York when something big's happening in Louisiana, I'm going to jump in and throw in my 2 cents. And Kim, this might get your attention once again. But I got a lot into the research from the Bright study from 2015 and Lang from 2000, and that's that people have a limited mental capacity to process information. And now there's this concept of social media fatigue. And I think when we pollute timelines with these value add type of tweets, a velocity signature that really doesn't mean much to anybody that's not a meteorologist, we're probably just filling timelines and perhaps causing people to scroll by and then maybe miss a tweet that might provide more important information.
But in the Alabama subculture, James, that velocity couplet might have more importance. What do you say to that?
This is going to be different in every market, and this is why I still say this, and I believe this to be true. You cannot do weather successfully unless you understand the people, the culture, and the geography of a local market. So for every market, it's going to be different. I could go to Denver, I could go to Seattle, I could go to Chicago, I could go to Pittsburgh, and it would take me years and years to gather the knowledge I have now of this market. So to me, that's one reason why it's not a bad thing to stick around a market for a long time. And I understand, want to get to a big market, I understand that, but there's something to be said for sticking around because you learn things and you know things. And you become better and more comfortable, and you're better at communicating across social, TV, digital, whatever. You're just better at it.
So Josh,
James,
taking you out of
question for you specifically, James. And this I would think you would find in a tornado event too, that if you look back at your tweets after the event, would you imagine that if you had a picture verification of a tornado, that would be your most popular tweet versus a velocity couplet if you did indeed share that?
Oh, there's no doubt. I've said that many times, especially on the television side. People they don't tend to do anything when you show radar. And I could be up there with my underwear flapping up and down my legs. Ooh, look at this tornado debris signature. Debris is being lofted. Look at this velocity couple of blah, 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 hook, debris ball, all that. And they don't do anything. But if you show a picture or a live video stream, they do something. And I believe it's the same way on social media. If they can see it, they'll do something. So it's very important to back up what
Yeah.
you're trying to say with pictures or video if you have it. And of course, my problem, the way we do it here, I don't have anybody else that has the password to my social media accounts. Not one person has tweeted for me. Not one person has posted anything for me, whether it be on Snapchat or Instagram or any of these things. And so when I'm on television, I'm on the green wall, and I got to have some focus on TV, and I can multitask. We have to be multitaskers, but sometimes I just can't do what I want to do over there. So the goal when I'm on television doing long form, it's to drive people on the tweeter and the face bag to the live stream, whether it's, of course, we're on Facebook Live. The coverage is on Facebook Live. So I'll just keep putting, here it is. Watch this.
Yeah.
And on the tweeter, I'll put the, links to that. And the same thing for Instagram and Snapchat. I'm trying to drive them to watch, because that way I can focus on putting the pictures and the video on the television side. That way everybody sees it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really have done a 180 in my philosophy with live coverage of these events over the last 12 months, especially getting deep into the study, is that I try to do everything I can now on video, because if I can stream live on Facebook and of course be on the air, and eventually I would think on Twitter, we can already do it on our app and our website. That's paramount to me, because I have the opportunity to explain things. And I found that in 140 characters, other than maybe your very small percentage of weather savvy followers on Twitter, velocity image will probably do more harm than good, and maybe cause more alarm than spread knowledge. But on air, you have time to explain exactly what that means. This means toward the radar. This means away from the radar. This tells us this is where the tornado might be, and it can be used in much greater context. So I at least with social media and severe weather, to me, the less noise we make, the better. It's not necessarily the total amount we're putting out there, but the quality of what we're putting out there.
So James, when you say, this looks like a bucket of spilled paint, is that a self-deprecating comment, or are you echoing what we're saying here, that this is, I've got to show this, but, I know that this is not easy to, does that make people drill down and look closer at what you're saying?
What I try and do, and again, I hang out in Walmarts and Dollar Generals and Targets and, weird places. I say weird. They're not weird. That we're weird. We don't hang out where real people are. We live in a different world. And when you talk with real people, that they don't really have a grasp on this radar stuff. Some do, but most don't. And yet we have to use it. What are you going to do? Show nothing? Just stand there in front of a blank, color behind you? You got to show something. But we have to be better at doing everything we can to get an image. And thank the Lord for this stuff, because now with social media, I get pictures instantly. And, within seconds, I can show video and a tornado picture. Or damage, like we've had a number back in the summer from these tropical systems, and it's been a huge advantage to do that. The other thing that we're learning, and we've talked about this before, people can't read maps. They can't find their house on a map. They don't even know how. Their geography literacy is a big problem here. So that's an issue, because we're showing maps when you're back to radar. When you're showing tornado video, you can call out, barns and barbecue joints and the things like we do, and people understand that. And the other problem, a lot of people just send you personal messages. During a typical tornado hurricane deal, I might have 2,000 messages on Facebook. And that's how most of my messages come now, not email, but Facebook private messages. And I do my best. I work harder than anybody else to answer all those things, but I just can't do it. And that's something else that, I can't help. But what we're all saying here, it's a big deal to get pictures and video of these things on whatever platform we're using. It's a big deal.
But doesn't it make more sense then if we know that stuff works and is valuable, can't we then move it off of Facebook to a station platform? We've just got to convince them to do it. We have the ability to create a chat room or whatever you want to do for people to ask you questions during severe weather. And then it supports the business model. And it's the same thing with the pictures. Yes, I understand people are there, but we did a great experiment. You remember storm pins, and who was the guy in Cincinnati that passed away not long ago? Had been there for 1,000 years. I can't remember his name. Oh, It doesn't matter. Anyway, he did an experiment with the storm pins thing, and they mentioned it on TV one night, and within 10 minutes, they had 400 downloads and people were uploading pictures. And it was because, in my opinion, that they realized, because he went up and promoted this thing on TV and said, this is, how we're going to do it, that what that message that was sent was, this is how you get to me and this is how you get on TV. Which is what a lot of people are looking. People are looking for a retweet. Many of them are looking for a retweet from you, James, because you give them their 15 minutes of fame by doing so.
Yeah, no, I agree. Tim Hedrick was the guy that passed away. WKRC, but
yes, he did an experiment, and boom, all these people rushed in, and that was all it took.
And I think if we're going to do this, we have to agree to do it as an industry. If we're going to take our content off Facebook. And I agree. Look, it is so frustrating. Here we are giving our content away. And they monetize it. They get the money, and we're providing content, and we just don't get anything.
Yeah, but if you're gonna sit around and wait for everybody to jump on the same train, you're never gonna leave the station.
Well, not everybody, but I'd say we like a Sinclair. If my group decided to do it, we're the big boys. If Sinclair pulled everything off Facebook,
why do you want everybody to do it though? Why don't you? I mean, you started the social trend on your own anyway, and we all followed you. The WeatherBrains people followed you because you goaded us into it, but everybody else followed you because
study people and what they do. They're looking at this stinking phone.
They're
looking at their Facebook feed. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at Facebook. I look to see what app. Now, these are older people. Now, if they're younger, they've got Snapchat open. And man, can they work that Snap. It is watch a 19-year-old work Snapchat.
But that's because we put the stuff there for them, and it's a bad place to do it. Now, if you go up on TV for a week or a month or whatever it is and say, this is where we're doing this now, go do that. If you want the best information, this is where you're going to get it. They'll go there.
What would happen, James?
My opinion is if I did that, the first thing they're going to go is to go to the guy at Channel 6 and start getting weather information from him because he's on the Facebook. They don't want to get out of that world.
That's interesting.
They do not want to get out of that world.
That's right.
They will dump me and go to this other guy or go to whoever else is there. And that's why somehow as a group we have to decide to get off together because
what do the research people say about that fear? Because it's the first time I've heard you say that.
I don't know what the research people say, but that's what I say about it.
No, I'm asking them.
That's right. We have two research officials here.
Yeah, there are some here. Have you met them? This is Josh and Kim.
James, I can't agree more. Is that we have to go to them because they're not going to change their habits. It's adapt, overcome, or be killed. Unfortunately, in the world of weather information, to go to all these platforms. And you're exactly right. If we don't go to them, they will find somebody else to go to them. And even if, James, it's very utopic to say we'd all get together and say, okay, no more weather on Facebook. There's going to be somebody out there that's playing to win that says, well, I'll be the only Facebook meteorologist then, and I'll hang on to all of the viewers that way. So I don't think.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was pretty much finished up there. I'd be interested to hear what Kim has to say about that. I just think that, and this is going to ebb and flow. We thought for a long time that Facebook was going to die, and it kind of came back. I personally, even having studied it and calling this my research baby, I think Twitter's going away. I don't think Twitter's going to be with us forever, and it's certainly one of the least popular social platforms for weather. So we just need to continue to adapt and be there and know that our core competency, television, at this point seems to remain number one in a severe weather event.
Go ahead, Kim.
Oh yeah, no, that's all right on. I think it's interesting. I want to share some statistics. You guys brought this up earlier, and it's totally pertinent to this conversation. The Pew Research Center does research on social media penetration every year. They have an annual survey, and they've been doing this since 2012. And James, what you were saying about Instagram, you're right on. The number one source for weather information, from just information, the number one social media site people are engaged with is Facebook. 79% of the adult population's on it, and that is up. It's been continually rising since 2012. Instagram is number 2 now. It's just pulled ahead of the number 3, which had been Pinterest, and just under that was LinkedIn, and under LinkedIn is Twitter. So Facebook has a 79% penetration. Instagram is far below it at 32%. And then Pinterest at 31%, LinkedIn 29%, and Twitter 24%. Twitter has been pretty flat. And I know that's been one of their struggles is they actually, as a company, have been struggling. They hit their sort of plateau and they thought they had all this promise and getting all these little bits of information out more quickly. And they're not finding that that's necessarily what everybody wants to be doing. So each one of these mediums offers a different package for how you're communicating. I think it's interesting, James, when you're talking about Instagram being more popular. I just went there a couple weeks ago. I had an account that I made years ago and I hadn't looked at it in forever. And I went and looked at it and I felt happier. Dang it, I felt happier.
It's a happy place. You don't see all this hate and anger and rage and political malarkey.
Well,
Facebook
was happy at one time.
Yeah, before they messed it up.
That's right.
I'm going to sell my Twitter stock, so I'll be back in just a minute here.
I'm not, yes, it is a fantasy of mine to have everybody just dump Facebook and go away, but I think that that's not realistic. I'm not advocating for that. But what I am suggesting is to trend away from it because it is such a bad experience. And some of the things that Josh just said just terrify me because by giving in, for lack of a better term, and maybe this is just me personally, but by giving in, you're playing into exactly what Mark Zuckerberg and Chris Cox are trying for. They are trying to become the internet, and they're trying to do it on the backs of the friends and family and relationships that you have. And that is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
Yep, that's exactly the deal.
But it is, but I mean, it's just that's such a it's just such a pessimistic outlook, but it's not going away. It's like, I don't know, the internet was created in the 90s. You could either get on it or get off of it. Facebook's not going away, so we need to figure out how to use it the right way. I sympathize with that. I wish we could segment weather all to one place. It's just not a realistic view of how things work. I totally agree with you, Kevin. It's just, unfortunately, it's kill or be killed, I think, and it's capitalism. If we don't adapt to Facebook, something else will rise up and replace us.
But what do you mean adapt to Facebook? What are you going to do? They're not going to work with you. The only reason that they're working with the news people is because of the threat of regulation. And that's both here now, and it was, and in Europe there was a little bit of a head start. This business about the Facebook news partnerships and this farce being run by Campbell Brown is totally that. It's totally a knee-jerk reaction to the threat of some sort of regulation, because they know the minute they get regulated in one spot, it's going to open it up to more scrutiny, and the whole model's going to crumble. What I would love to see is to find out, I started this in the pre-show, but I think we would all be terrified to find out, to see our profiles. I mean, the back end profile that Facebook has built based on what you like and what you give a grumpy face and an angry face and all of the other things. They don't show you that part.
You can actually see, they have a tool for that. You can see how they've categorized you.
Right, but not all of those things, right? See, because I went in and looked at my settings, and one of the things that was interesting to me, and I still don't know why they did it this way, but I was listed, they give you some bullet points, and I was listed as being conservative. But interestingly, in parentheses ahead of the conservative was the word very. Now, where they got that, I don't have any idea. I don't know if I'm very conservative or not. I don't know what their definition is. But the reason that it's dangerous is you look at what Russia was doing outside of the presidential interference, right? The other thing that now is coming to light that they're doing is they're trying to sow seeds of discontent. Exactly. They're trying to separate us. They're trying to get, one side against another. And so now you get into this place where this was the thing that ProPublica did, where they went in and, does anybody read the Jew hater thing? They went in and they got the Jew hater thing. They could search for Jew haters or whatever they could advertise. And then that led somehow to conservatives. And my point in that is that what they're doing is now allowing bad actors, as Mark Zuckerberg calls them, to target you in ways that they want to do. And what showed up in the election thing is they specifically went to certain states that they thought were key. And so they're smart people, these bad actors. They're now going in and saying, okay, well, we got caught here finally. What's the next act for this? And they're already in there figuring it out. It's like I said with the credit card thing. Just show me the rules so I can get around them. But what they're doing by creating all these profiles of us in the background that we can't see and we don't know is allowing that behavior. And
they're serving us up more quickly and more efficiently.
That's right. And the whole thing will crumble, and it should, if they open up the black box and show everybody what the profile is that they have built of you.
I just want to know what my Aunt Kathy had for breakfast this morning.
Exactly.
Hey, let's take a quick break here. We're going to do, and again, Brian is out, no Professor Peters. Tony Rice, our main man, who came to visit me here last week. Good to see Tony. He's got an astronomy report. We'll come back with the weather roundup, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
November is nearly upon us, and there's a couple of astronomical events that don't require a telescope to look forward to this month. On November 2nd, Venus will be just a few degrees away from the bright star Spica in the pre-dawn sky. If you see any meteors around the 5th, they're probably the result of the southern Taurid meteor shower that peaks that evening. And also on the 5th, the general pain in the rear that is daylight saving ends. Not quite a supermoon, that's going to happen on December 3rd. But the full moon of November 4th will occur within just a couple of days of perigee, or the closest point in the moon's orbit. So it should look big and bright as it rises that evening. On the 17th, any meteors you see might be the result of the northern Taurid meteor shower. On the 21st, Saturn's going to be just 3 degrees south of the moon. And that final week of the month, that's going to be a good time to spot Mercury. Now, this planet's normally hidden in the glare of the sun. It's difficult to catch a glimpse of. But on the 24th, it's going to reach the point of greatest elongation, or the amount of separation between it and the sun from our vantage point here on Earth. Finally, on the 29th, Mars will be just a few degrees of the bright star Spica. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
We'll pick back up this conversation on social media here in just a minute. And before I go, if I don't play this during the show, it's just...
Let's get social.
Social.
With social media.
All right, enough of that. So quickly, weather roundup. It was cold. I wish Aubrey was here to talk about how cold it was in her location up in Harrisonburg. Down here in the deep south, we had some 20s, Bill Murray, in our part of the world, which is very low latitude, a lot of frost, and wrapped up the growing season. What's happening in Oklahoma, Kim, where the wind comes whistling down the plain?
Exactly that. There's been the battle of air masses day after day. Out here, we had our first freeze about 3 nights ago, and then the next day was very cold. Then it was 72 and beautiful yesterday, and then today again in the 50s. So we are throwing ourselves into fall every day. It seems like the wind is howling 30 to 40 miles an hour from a different direction, and that's what I love so much about the plains. It feels like that battleground. It's great.
Yep, and I should say it's where the wind sweeps down the
I was going to
plain.
ask you, is it sweep or
Whistle.
Yes.
I don't know where that came from. It's lack of sleep. We had a real dud of a tropical storm this past weekend called, what is it, Felipe? Felipe? How do you pronounce that?
Felipe, I think we decided last week. Yeah.
Okay. It was kind of a dud. In fact, it just kind of didn't do much. But boy, that thing was sucked into this huge low that's over New England. And I noticed this morning they had winds gusting to 133 miles per hour on top of Mount Washington, where Kevin frolicked as a child, right?
I love it up there. I've driven up there. It's a wonderful drive. I want to do one of the. Did we ever have somebody? They call them edu trips. We did that years ago, didn't we?
We need to get somebody back.
Yeah, we've been doing this show so long, I can't remember what we've done anymore. But yeah, they will have you up there, take you up there in one of those snowcats, and you go up there in the middle of the wintertime, and you can stay with them for like a week or something. Fantastic experience. I haven't done it. I want to.
We ought to send Brian Peters up there. He can steal some
'Cause
Wi-Fi.
he's
We can have him as
expendable.
our special car. Yeah, exactly. He's expendable. We can put him up there. So, Josh, what's happening down in Louisiana? Looks like you're going to warm up in the days ahead. And you were muted, sir. If you could unmute, we'll be.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, we had similar weather to you, James. We had a nice cold front come through on Friday evening, had some showers and storms, nothing severe. But then over the weekend, got into the upper 30s at night. And for Louisianans, that means wrap your pipes, cook the hottest soup you can, dig the heaviest layers you can out of the closet. And being a Yankee boy at heart that grew up in Philadelphia, I kind of roll my eyes and go outside in shorts and take care of some leaf raking. But yeah, it was beautiful. And it looks like we're in good shape until some rain comes in on Wednesday.
Yep, and we should mention we are starting the late fall tornado season in Dixie Alley Wednesday of this week, and we see no evidence of any severe weather for the next 10 to 15 days or so. So with that, Bill Murray, I hate to do this, but I got to go. I'm the lead on the weather back here, so I got to flip it over to you for more social media talk and picks of the week.
Yeah, thanks, James. I appreciate it. Now, so, Josh, a few more things out of context.
Okay.
You mentioned a statement in your dissertation about from I guess a survey respondent. I follow weather on Twitter because I want watches and warnings. That sounds counterintuitive to what we've talked about tonight.
It is, and it was counterintuitive to what I found in the survey. I'll give you a take-home point after this, but yeah, I asked the question, is why do you follow weather accounts on Twitter? And I gave you kind of 4 or 5 choices to choose from, and that was among the top. And also within that was because I want a forecast, because I want to learn more about the weather, because I want pictures and video. And as I proved in the case studies, pictures and video seem to be most popular. Interestingly, that ranked at the bottom as for why people think that they follow weather accounts on Twitter. They think the main reason they follow weather accounts is for watches and warnings. At least that's why they say they follow weather accounts. But again, in an actual case study, it seems to be what they respond to towards the bottom of the scale. So that's a whole thing that I concluded with in my dissertation, is that what people think they want and what they actually want are 2 different things.
So you also said they will scroll past a forecast.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because they just pick up what in the 140 characters what the forecast?
Well, because
is
it's not sexy. It was 75 with blue sky and sunshine here today. It's not important to them. It really doesn't affect their day. Everybody said on the survey, when I said, "Do you want a daily weather forecast?" I had over 80% yeses. But then when I showed them a picture of a daily forecast, it got some of the lowest response rate. People voted that I would not retweet this, I would not like this, I probably would scroll past it. So I want a forecast, but when you show me one, I don't like that very much. And again, the same point, I'll say it again, I'll keep saying this, what people think they want and what they actually want are 2 different things.
Hey, let me jump in if I can, Bill.
Absolutely.
I would love both of you, Kim and Josh, to comment on this statement. I think there's a really important difference between pushing data at people, which social media is, and having them pull it. Meaning they've gone out and asked for it and they've drawn it to them. And I think that those people are much from a business model standpoint, because again, it sadly comes back to advertising, but the pull is, I think that they're more important. I think that they're more valuable, and I think that they're more engaged, as opposed to the automated sunset time tweet that has been pushed at them by an IFTTT script.
So go ahead on that, Kim. I actually have some numbers I want to scroll to, and I could kind of read some of those off from my findings if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I think that the case studies after real weather events really speak to that very much, Kevin, that I mean, TV is not pushed at anybody. It's a pull source for the most part. And I think that people might receive their first notification increasingly from one of the push sources, in addition to things like the environment, which is a pusher, and social contacts, of course. But they're pulling information. They're pulling information from websites. That's something that they're going to do that milling process. So I think that's where you're going to get a lot of the connections made. And for this reason, I actually want to throw a bit of a cherry bomb into the conversation about the consistency of platforms and worrying about Facebook and things not being timed correctly. Do we know that that's even a problem? Do we know that anyone is confused by weather being provided on these social media platforms?
Well, anecdotally, I'm going to say yes, because if you take just a radar loop, for example, or anything, I will see that stuff liked or commented on or sometimes shared hours after it was posted. And if it's time-sensitive data, then that's a problem, I think.
I agree. No, I agree. I think that is concerning. But do we have any evidence that's ever adversely affected anybody's decisions? Had a negative impact? And this is actually something I know in the conversation about HAZSEMP, possibly changing watches and warnings. There's a heavy contingent of researchers in this area who've risen to sort of say, well, you might get people who on a quiz can't say that they know what the difference is between watches and warnings, which actually, by the way, is the vast minority of people. But even for those people, in a real world context, do they not have a lot of other things that are helping them, that they have access to, including the environment itself, that is helping them to know what it is they ought to be doing? And for that, with that added layer, we don't really have any strong evidence that watch or warning confusion, per se, those terms, really cause anybody to do anything that's detrimental. And similarly, I don't know if for social media, the conversations that are had about this, the intertemporal issue on Facebook, or the consistency of colors in maps across stations, if those actually have real material effects on people. And Josh, I'm not sure if you've seen any research on this, but again, we are social meteorologists and meteorologists on social media. We tend to be in our own little sphere talking about things we think are problems. People get all bent out of shape on things that we don't have evidence that necessarily they are troubling.
That's good stuff, Kim. I think I tend to agree with you, and I think I'm probably a victim of this, of assuming there are problems that may not be there, especially as someone who's just in my first couple of studies here. I think the goal, at least for me, was understanding communication and risk perception and trying to do best with what we have right now. But I am not aware of anything that's been detrimental to people in terms of our watch and warning messages. And I think that might be an interesting question to kind of attack. I'm not sure what methodology we would go about to try to find the answer to that question. I think you'd have to then get into some very hard to get data. You're dealing with injuries and fatalities, and that's tough to attain. But we could find out and then dig back from there as to what their message reception process was and see what happened. To go back a little bit further, as far as the watches and warnings and people on Twitter here, the numbers I told you I wanted to look up is, I think, Kevin, I'm sure you would agree with this, is we have to be careful as to what exactly we are giving people on these platforms, because there's only so much they're willing to accept. And what I found, I asked is, what watches and warnings do you want to know about? And I gave you a list of about 10. And everybody said, I want to know about tornadoes, severe thunderstorms, and flash floods. Do you know what less than 25% of my respondents want to know about?
River warnings.
Heat, and that's the #1 killer over a 30-year average, because heat doesn't have a very high dread factor. It's not something we think of as very deadly. But at the same time, and this was just kind of a limitation of my methodology, is I was asking digitally connected Louisianans, do you want to know about heat? Chances are those that are digitally connected are not those that are losing their life in heat events. But it just goes to show that there are certain events out there people perceive as more deadly than others. And flash flooding ranked below tornado and severe thunderstorm, even though it kills more people on average each year than tornadoes and severe thunderstorms. And if we're pushing out these tornado and severe thunderstorm and flash flood warnings constantly, inevitably, and whether there is a false alarm ratio, we know that. We know there's a cry wolf effect. What is that critical limit we hit where people stop paying attention? So that's why I think we need to pick and choose our pushes very carefully.
I thought it was interesting today that I was in a school and in the assistant principal's office, and the weather radio was sitting there on her corner piece. And I said, "Oh, so you're in charge of the weather?" I said, "Oh, so you have a weather radio? Great." And her response was, "No, I'm in charge of turning it off when it goes off." And I thought that was an interesting comment. But I have experience in this because I have an app called MyWarn, and 70% of the users have flash flood warnings turned off.
Mm-hmm.
They will all have tornadoes and severe thunderstorm warnings. That's why they have it. But 70% of the people will have flash flood warnings turned off.
I'll tell you, when we plugged in our weather radio, Patrick and I, in our first house, first weather radio together, it just went off a couple weeks ago in the middle of the night, and there were flash flood warnings, and I was like, I can't do this. I know it's for the stupid creeks, and it's just like, we are not going to be affected. Close your ears, listening audience. I did look at things, and I know it's important to be notified if there's potentially going to be a threat, but goodness, it wasn't something that was worth me waking up in the middle of the night. And we tried just turning down the volume of it. Eventually, Patrick just ripped out the batteries. And it's really, really sad. And I'm not surprised at all by that. Not at all.
That goes into that contribution of the false alarm ratio that we were just talking about in Cry-Wolf syndrome. I'd love to have one of the Weather Service guys here on this, like Rick Smith. And this, I think now we get back to the technical and the meteorological discussion, is that maybe we need to, hopefully over time, hone our tornado warnings and our flash flood warnings to smaller polygons. That way you're not notified when it actually isn't going to affect you. I don't know how close or how far away we are away from that. And I know that a lot of weather people get their shorts in and out when we start talking about doing better and better and better, because we always seem to be doing better with the forecast. But that's where there's that intersection of social science and physical science, is that still one is ahead of the other, or one is behind the other. So that's a textbook example of that right there, Kim.
Yeah, and in the case of flooding, one of the issues still, I agree with you totally. We have so little social science on flood communication, in part because we don't have very good physical science. It's very, very complex. The hydrology and the hydraulics, we don't even have really accurate representations of floodplains, let alone water moving over a surface to get to those low-lying areas. It's not just about water filling up from the bottom and coming up. That's not how flooding works. Something that is going to be a big focus this year with all of the big flood events, especially in Houston with Harvey, is going to be how well do we represent inundation? So we forecast in the Weather Service right now for river points, but in many watersheds, especially in ones that are relatively flat and complex, that is not a very good representation of what is actually likely to occur for anybody. Without having the information, I don't know what we can give people as communicators to really do better with that, to target more precisely, or to give them decision relevant information. And so in some sense, I almost feel like the Weather Service is a little hamstrung because of where the technology sits. We just have better detection of things like tornadoes than a flood.
And I can add two things to that. I mean, we just did it last year. It was by far the worst event I've gone through in my career, and that was our flood here in southeast Louisiana in 2016. And it's a weather person's worst nightmare, a communicator's worst nightmare, when somebody says, well, what's going to happen at my house? And you have to tell them, I don't know. And the reason we had to tell them I don't know is because it was an unprecedented flood event. And we forecast flooding based on previous levels the water has reached. And when we're getting to unprecedented levels on the rivers, we know we're going to have unprecedented flooding away from them. And the second part of that is, in terms of getting better at that and communicating that, until we understand where that water is going to go, there's no way to figure out how we're going to communicate that to people. So it's kind of a two-pronged issue there that is only going to come in time.
How fascinating is it that it receives so little attention? I've actually, just in digging into the issue a little bit more this year with the Weather Service, it occurred to me, our investments have been so much in severe weather because probably it's those are where the risk perception lies. People really don't want to die in tornadoes, and they think less of water, possibly because it's more commonly encountered in their daily lives. And for reasons actually I don't know that we've fully documented, it's not as dreaded.
And think about this. With sure, we all talk about how are there more hazards really, or is it because there are more people? That's an age-old question, right? So we're building in the path of tornadoes. We're building in the path of hurricanes. There's
in the path of flooding.
We're building in the path of flooding.
There's two parts to that. Not only are we building where it can flood, but by building elsewhere, we can cause it to flood somewhere else. I'm dealing with that right now in my area. I have an open field behind my house that they want to build on, and that means they're going to raise that land by 4 feet. Guess what? In that flood, the water stopped at my doorstep. If they build a neighborhood behind me 4 foot above where I am, that water's coming into my house next time. So that's something we got to think about too. Not only when we build,
Mhm.
are you building in a floodplain, but you're creating new floodplains because the water has to go somewhere.
And Josh, your free advice of the night is to buy flood insurance.
Absolutely. And you know what? We saw a spike here. I looked at the maps from Harvey. I was on Twitter. It might have been Brian Wood. Does that sound right? Tweeting flood insurance maps and flood coverage. And it was about 30% in the Houston area. Well, 1 year prior to our flood, it was about 20% in the Baton Rouge area. That same map's now jumped to about 45 or 50%. So unfortunately, it's live and learn with flooding.
Well, the new movement is going to be resilience. I was at the Flash National Disaster Resilience Conference in Atlanta last week. And, you know, with these sort of losses on the uninsured side and the insured side, something's got to give. And, you know, it's going to take grassroots. It's going to, number one, buying flood insurance. Number two, you know, being prepared to take care of your own family for not 3 days like we've been preaching for all these years, but 7 days. And to get, you know, our legislators to understand that they've got a part in, you know, in controlling where this development goes, because we are heading down a bad road where we're going to keep rebuilding the same places over and over. And General Russell Honore was the keynote speaker on the final day, and you know, we got to have him on the show because he, you know, just railed against stupid. You know, all of his examples. He showed a house that was built in the Batur, which I think, Josh, you can probably explain better than I can, but it's inside the levee, but before the river. And you know, this $1 million home is up to the eaves and water. And he said, it's in the Batur, you know. You know, he's like, you can't keep doing stupid.
Yeah.
And now that person apparently is suing the parish in Louisiana because they were allowed to build there, which is the ultimate insult.
Yeah, and I mean, most of Louisiana is within some river floodplain. So that's going on everywhere. And you can't, you know, the other side of that, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate here, is the debate that's going on with the property behind my house is you at the same time, while yes, me as a resident, I don't want somebody to build there, I can't tell somebody their $10 or $15 million plot of land is now worth zero because they can't sell it for new construction. So you're going to affect a lot of money in somebody one way or the other. But you said resilience. I think it's resilience and also preparation. Bill, is going to be the new wave of the game. We're now, at least from a media standpoint, with projects like this, making people aware that, hey, with this new construction, you may now be in an area that's flooded, even if you've never flooded before. So protect yourself, get insurance.
And I think we're uniquely qualified as the meteorologists in the bunch, wherever that is. I think we have to leverage our position to help extend that message. And I was really pleased to see Dr. Rick Knabb on the Weather Channel, you know, come back from the conference the very same night and start preaching those messages on the Weather Channel, which is, you know, very important. So I know we've kept you up way past your bedtime, Josh.
My alarm goes off in 5 hours. How about that?
I want to ask you one more thing. That, you know, I was looking at your bullet
Sure.
points in a slide, and you said, you know, warnings, format, unexpected result, apathy, avoid dangerous assertions. Explain that set of statements.
Okay. So like I mentioned, Kim and I were talking about this much earlier in the broadcast, is that what I had found was in my 2 case studies, the most efficient way to warn people, to get a retweet or to find an impression in a timeline, was to provide the threat, an actionable item, and some level of geography, hopefully a map. So as much information as possible. And that outperformed a tweet that just had, say, tornado warning and no actionable statement in both the tornado study and the flood study I did. Now, in the survey, I showed people, and to avoid priming or setting a bias, I showed people one of 4 warning types, one with a threat, one with threat and efficacy, one with just efficacy, and one that was a text-only statement with no image. And the one that got the most likely to be retweeted by just looking at it was the threat only with no image. So based on the literature and the case studies, that's not what should have happened. So why I said apathy was, I believe that in trying to perform a study where I was avoiding setting a bias and setting some sort of priming effect, and in showing people a geographically ambiguous location, they said, that's not for Louisiana. I don't care. Just share this one. Plus, the results weren't really that far apart. We're talking about 40% to 30% in the range of the 4. So, and I said avoid dangerous assertions, because I would say don't take what I found here in the, if this is the way you warn people on Twitter, don't say, oh, this proves that what I'm doing is right. I think the case studies carry more weight here. So I think we need to avoid assuming everybody carries the same knowledge we do as weather nerds or meteorologists. And just because a consultant told us, and James got into this earlier, just because a consultant tells you people don't like being told what to do, at least in those high impact weather events, it's a good idea to give them some advice as to how they can protect themselves. And that goes back to psychology. And Kim, you'll probably appreciate this, but we're talking about the extended parallel process model, and that people react rationally when they're responded to the danger at hand, but they react irrationally when they're responding to their own fear. And if we just tell them there's a tornado warning, they're going to react to fear and perhaps react irrationally, or a maladaptive response. If we tell them there's a tornado warning, go to a low-level interior room, oh, I have an idea of how I can control the danger at hand now, and they'll make a rational adaptation to the situation. So I think it's important to provide threat and efficacy in a message, even if a TV consultant tells you, don't tell people what to do.
Oh, it would have been so great to have you on the show last week. We had
because we talked about that.
Yeah, we had a conversation about even the kind of efficacy messaging might differ by situation, the kinds of things you ought to tell people. And I think you just would have totally been a great contributor to that conversation. And I was mentioning it, just a life learning experience for myself with the tornado that happened in Norman, not this past Friday, or not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before. There was a brief week tornado that went through town. And by the time the thing had materialized, we'd been preparing. We had prepared our shelter in our garage. But by the time the thing materialized, I looked at it and went, we don't necessarily have time I don't want to go out to the garage anymore, because that door could blow in and we'd be worse off than if we were, say, in our interior bathroom. So at that point, because I'd thought about it a little bit ahead of time, we ducked into the bathroom, didn't go to the best shelter, right? So there are multiple layers to the kinds of safety that you can attain, and doing something just a little bit better. It's really important to tell people that, and to say, this is really good. This is something that is a very good option. It's not that it's just what you have to do and we'll see if you survive, or even worse, tell people they won't survive unless they're in XYZ situation. In almost every case, those kinds of things get everybody through it. So I think we just totally would have dug that conversation. Wish we'd had you on last week.
I love the lightning example, and this has been beaten to death. How often when thunder roars, go indoors, right? Well, that's not what you would say to your friends. So I've tried this with friends to say, hey, thunder roars, go indoors, everybody, at a pool party. How about this one? We're all in the pool. I hear thunder and say, hey, let's go ahead and check the score of the game and grab a beer. Well, that turns a negative situation into a positive situation, and it gets people out of the pool, and they take the desired action, right? So you can make these things work in your favor if we just talk to people like people instead of talking to people like we're meteorologists.
But it won't work unless you make it rhyme, Josh. You have to make it rhyme.
Yeah. Is it if you're in the pool?
I created one for flooding here instead of turn around, don't drown. Because we're so flat here and we don't have those raging torrents. It's flat and we'll get 6 or 7 inches of standing water. I say hit the brakes, y'all, don't stall. Because inevitably, every flood event, we have cars stalled out on roads because people just say, oh, I can drive through that. And yeah, you're not going to get swept away here in Louisiana, but you're going to have a lot of damage to your car and it's going to get expensive.
That is really good. That is really good. Because I guarantee no one is thinking they're going to drown going to that water, but I bet you they are thinking that their car might stall.
That's what I
8 to 10 grand right there.
So Josh, you mentioned, that you don't like showing velocity or, whatever on the radar, but I was surprised that the person who followed you at NWA, Dave Nussbaum from, down the road in New Orleans, made a point that during the Southeast Louisiana outbreak in February or whenever it was, that showing the radar and the velocity couplets was very effective with his audience. So he seems to disagree with what you and James have said, and I haven't had Dave on the show to ask him what he really thought about that. But comment on that.
Well, those were two different beasts there, because Dave's was about his TV presentation, and I think a velocity signature has value on a TV presentation where you can elaborate on what that means. I'm not sure, while you might be able to explain a velocity signature on a Twitter post, I'm
You
not
have to
sure
assume that your audience knows what that means already.
Right, and especially you get Twitter can become a really nasty game of whisper down the line, right? And that gets retweeted. Eventually, an account's probably going to see that doesn't know what that means. So yeah, Dave and I had two different sites. Dave's a good friend of mine, and we used to work together. And his was about his TV presentation, and I don't disagree with anything James said or what Dave does. I do show velocity on TV because I feel I can adequately explain it there. On Twitter, I'm not sure if those things have a place. And I get a little worried when I see, weather colleagues from out of a market sharing a velocity signature. That obviously starts to go viral because that's the sexy weather stuff. But I think, especially if you're not a public meteorologist, maybe you're a research meteorologist or a National Weather Service meteorologist, realize that if you share that, there is probably somebody following you who doesn't understand the weather as well as you do. Even if you're a National Weather Service meteorologist and have a heavy base of meteorology followers, there are probably a couple of weather fans that follow that don't understand that as well as you do. And at some point, you're going to create confusion for somebody. And I'm not saying stop doing it altogether. Just think about potential ramifications. And again, each communication situation is different. There's no one size fits all. But I think we could cut back a little bit on the extraneous tweets during high impact weather events.
Kim, anything you want to add before we do a quick pick of the week roundup?
I think that's a really great note to leave it on.
And we appreciate you staying up so late with us, Josh, for sure. I didn't warn you about pick of the week. If you may have heard of it, here's your chance. You've got about 30 seconds to come up.
You know what? Go ahead. You guys go first, and I'll have to think about that.
Kevin, can you contribute, or are you just looking pretty? No. Okay. Kim, I know you can contribute. Why don't you give us your pick of the week?
Yeah, my pick of the week was, as I pull it up again, the pick of the week was that Pew research on social media from 2016. The 2017 hasn't come out yet, should be coming out soon, but this shows not only the longitudinal data or the data over time on the saturation of various social media platforms in among U.S. adults, but it also gives you the demographic breakdowns. So you can see things like, for people who are using Facebook, they lean female, they tend to be younger, but it does reach 62% of 65 plus crowd, has education and suburban, urban, and all those other things, and so on for each platform. So especially for broadcasters out there, if you are thinking about, who are you really reaching? What are they like? If you're not already getting enough from all of your consultants, if you want to think about the social media platforms a little bit, that data is out there for you.
Outstanding. Well, my pick of the week will be a podcast that I got to be on the second version of, the Southern Mysteries podcast. They were talking about eels falling from the sky in the 19th century in Alabama. So we turned it into an actual weather conversation, and it went really well. So I'd like to give a shout out to my friends at the Southern Mysteries podcast, and maybe it'll be one of those big podcasts that hits the big money. So, Josh Eachus, what's your pick of the week?
I'll tell you what, I hate to draw a blank here, but if it does it have to be completely weather related?
Nah, you can.
I will.
It just got to, some relevance of some sort.
I came across a story today on ABC News that I thought was fantastic. You might have heard about it. It was about 2 women and 2 dogs who were stranded in the Pacific Ocean for 5 months. Since last May, their sailboat had taken water and they'd gone missing on their way to Tahiti, and they were just rescued a few days ago. And their friends and family had feared the worst, thought that maybe the 2 women would have had to eat their 2 dogs to survive, or that they'd be kind of frail and meager, but they prepared, and this kind of ties into a weather situation, is preparing. And they took 6 months worth of food with them. They had a water distilling process and enough food to split with their dogs. And they actually were all found, according to the Coast Guard, in incredibly good condition, considering how long they'd been out to sea. And they and their 2 dogs are now home safely. And that was my Monday motivation today. When I saw that story, especially being a dog lover, I was like, that's awesome, because I know if it came down to it, I'd die with my dog. I'd never eat my dog. So, so that's mine. Yeah.
Just having watched an old Nova on the Franklin expedition where they actually had to eat each other, I can identify
Right.
that. Kim, you want to preview next week's pick of the week with a little tease, huh?
Yeah, I'm going to give a tease to my pick of the week for next week, and the reason is it's a report from the National Academies that is coming out in 2 days. It's coming out November 1st. It's a report on advancing social and behavioral science research and application within the weather enterprise. This is something that they've been working on for a little over a year and a half at the National Academies. The study was headed up by Ann Bostrom from the University of Washington and our dearly beloved in our field, Bill Hook, from the AMS Policy Program. I had the chance to preview some of the findings and recommendations in the report. This thing was sort of my baby while I was working at NOAA headquarters. So I want everyone to be aware that's coming out on the 1st. Be looking for that and op-eds about it. There's some really great recommendations and findings. And Josh, I think you'll probably resonate with a good number of the kinds of things that they discuss being outstanding challenges for those of us who are working in this area or trying to. Including one of the things that you mentioned before, there's very little institutional support. We don't really have, clear homes at institutions where the research happens in our subdisciplines. So that'll be my pick of the week next week is that report, but be looking out for that in the next couple of days.
Outstanding, Kim. So Josh, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they go about that?
Twitter, you can look for @JoshEachus. Probably going to update that handle after I graduate and walk on December 15th.
Dr. Josh Eachus.
Yeah, we'll see what's available out there. Something like that. And then Facebook's meteorologist Josh Eachus and email jeachus@wbrz.com. And please do get in touch with me. I'm always, now that I've finished with my schoolwork, looking for kind of new research opportunities, new topics to discuss. And if I could do a quick plug, I know we've kind of talked a little bit about this on the show before, but you may have heard of the weathersocial.com. That's a blog site created for Dr. Jasko, Dr. Myers are on there, a couple of other folks in the weather community, and I'm going to try to revamp that in January. It's been dormant since I manage it, since I've been getting to the nitty-gritty of my schoolwork here. But if anybody's watching and would like to contribute to that blog site to talk about weather communication, that's what we do there. Would love to have that, and that's about it. That's all I have.
Yeah, that sounds like an excellent pick of the week right there. So as we come to the end of the show, I'll tease a few guests that are coming up next week. We'll be joined by Dr. Pam Heinzelman from your neck of the woods up there, Kim. Excited about that. She's going to talk about Warn on Forecast and other things she's working on. We'll have the guys from the Weather Pros on November 13th. Steve Glazer and his wife, Karen Jeroman from Weather News will be with us. Is that right? Did I say that correctly? Is that the network? Weather Nation, I guess. Is that right? What's the other TV network?
That is Weather Nation.
Okay, yeah. So they're going to be on. They're going to talk about careers and how they've evolved. I think that's going to be exciting. I've got the new book by author Stephen Long about the 1938 hurricane in New England. He's going to be on the 27th. Steve Weiss, who's retiring from the Storm Prediction Center, is going to be with us on December 11th. I'm excited about that. We've invited Greg Mant, who's in charge of the JPSS program, to join us on December 18th. And then Greg Carbon will be along. We'll record on Thursday, December 21st. That show will get released into the wild sometime around the new year. And I'm excited about that because he'll be putting the 10th and final placeholder in his top 10 weather events of the year. So anyway, WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We do it every Monday night. We tend to go longer and longer when we have great guests like Josh. Pretty soon we're just going to stay up all night and just do this thing all night long. But please tell your friends about us. Consume us on all the normal podcast channels, and we'll just keep doing it because we love doing it. So until next week, when Dr. Pam Heinzelman is our guest, have a great time. Keep looking up at the sky. Keep learning about the weather. See you next week. Josh, thanks for staying up.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. It was a blast.
You're welcome anytime. Just yell at us. Keep us posted.
Sounds great. Take care.
All right.
Have a good day, Bill.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks.
Bye, Bill.
Bye. Maybe not. It is still happening. Oh yeah, this is good. Kevin is there. Kevin's he looks tense, man. Wow, he looks really tense. Are you tense? We're on Song of the Night. We're doing a simulcast right now. This is thoroughly confusing here. So
Kevin can't talk. He's doing television. I've got to go do some television here. So we're going to say so long to our WeatherBrains listeners. Thank you guys for watching and listening. We'll see you guys next week. Have a great week and God bless.